Welcome to the 15-Minute Patriot podcast. I am Ross, the Dude Maher from Rhode Island, and I am joined by my colleagues, Dave the Wildman Wilder from southeastern Massachusetts, and David Sod from the free state of Florida. At 15-Minute Patriot, we focus on action steps. That is, what you can do as a citizen, as a voter, to make a difference. So, even if you'll take just 15 minutes a month, you will be pleasantly surprised to see what you can accomplish. We, the people, are at the top of the government, and it's time to get involved. And we want to hear from you and about the things that you've done to make a difference. So you can email us at 15minutepatriot@gmail.com. That's 15minutepatriot@gmail.com, or on Facebook at 15-Minute Patriot. And with that, I am leading off from the fine state of Florida. All right, good evening, everybody. So our general topic for tonight is taxes. And you can approach this issue from a lot of different angles. So as I look at a recent report that I found on Fox News, the subject was that there are several states that are looking at multiple ways and studying how they can either reduce or completely eliminate property taxes. And the issue somewhat being this: you buy a house, you eventually pay off the mortgage on that house, and yet you never seem to really own the property because you're essentially renting it from the government because of your property taxes. And according to this particular article, that on average, the state of Pennsylvania, or within the state of Pennsylvania, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 homes are seized by the government annually due to not paying property taxes. So the issue really gets down to, do you actually ever truly own your own home? And I think is a valid argument to be made that no, actually, you don't ever get to own your home because you're always renting the land itself from the government. What do you say, guys?
Well, in the state of Florida, I mean, I want to talk about taxes a different way, but in the state of Florida, DeSantis, our governor, has brought it up twice now about getting rid of property taxes. He feels the same way you said. How many times do we have to pay for our taxes on our house? Now, in talking with a couple of the representatives, they say it's doable, but not as quickly as he wants to do it. They see it as a 3 to 5 year step plan to phase out property taxes in Florida. But I mean, if the amount of taxes we pay, go ahead.
That sounds more like a political consideration versus a logistics requirement.
Well, I think his wife is trying to run for governor here,
Yeah, okay.
And she's got her hands full because Byron Donald is pretty much looks like he's going to slip right in.
And Byron Donald, as a representative, is very popular.
He's good.
He's good. He's well spoken, and he's actually gotten a fair amount of camera time. So people know him. People nationally recognize him, and that'll pay dividends.
Yeah, this is kind of directed at you, Russ. But I'm in the high school I graduated from, East Providence. We get together twice a year. It's called Townie Time in the spring and in the fall. Now I've missed them because I'm down here in Florida. But the last time I was up there we were at a bar, the whole group that shows up, and we're having a drink. And this young lady, graduated high school, comes up. She goes, "So how the hell do you like that crazy governor you got down there in Florida?" And I looked at her and I said, "Well, at least he's not wasting money on bridges to nowhere that fall apart." And I just walked away. But I thought that was kind of a brazen way to say, hey, Dave, how the hell are you doing? How's it going in Florida now? Right away, finds a way to attack DeSantis. Anyway.
Well, I mean, going back to taxes, I think the property taxes is getting more scrutiny because the price for everything is going up, and people are looking at waste and abuse, and property taxes per se really isn't all that fair, right? So property taxes are used in municipalities primarily to pay for schools. Not everybody who owns a house has kids, and a lot of people that don't own houses have kids. So is it fair? So you can ask that question, but more and more people are focusing on what you brought up, Ross, that if my lack of paying taxes can lose me my property, do I really own it? And
Yeah.
so this idea that we can own property is so integral to the American society. Is it a myth? And
It-
right now, I'd have to say, yeah, it's a myth.
Yeah, I agree with you, at least in one regard. And this is, I at the same time I can also understand this this 3 to 5 year glide path, so to say, because in one regard, and I often think about the town that I live in, which fiscally is one of the best managed towns in the entire state of Rhode Island. But the one of the things that towns do need, and I can appreciate this, is that there a level of stability. At least, in terms of property taxes, you can predict out roughly what the revenues will be, assuming all people actually pay their taxes, and we all know that there are many that don't. However, kind of jumping off of something that you were starting to say there is, it's really not fair. And if I want to be able to make an improvement of some kind to my land, to my home, I have to get building permits, which, okay, that's one thing. But one of the things that gets triggered as a result of pulling permits is it invites revaluation of your property. So I was talking to my daughter about this just last night because we're looking at doing a project, and I said to her, the shed over there, if I do those concrete post things, that you dig the
Mhm.
hole, you put the quick tube in, if I did that, or if I poured like a patio or some type of cement footing for the shed to sit on, that now becomes a taxable structure. If I leave the thing on cinder blocks, it's not. How does that make sense? It, like, in Ross's mind, it kind of doesn't. And so where I can also tie this over to, and we don't have it in Rhode Island anymore, thank God, but we used to have the vehicle excise tax, and it was based on the value of your vehicle, right? I found myself at a Ford dealership looking to buy a brand new F-150, and the salesman actually talked me out of it. Why? Ultimately, the issue came down to, or he didn't say, "Hey, Russ, you shouldn't buy this," but he laid it out. He was trying to get me to consider a lease versus buying. But the real issue started coming down to the vehicle excise tax. And I ended up not buying the vehicle because I said to myself, I'm being punished for wanting to have a newer, more reliable vehicle. Because that's what that's how I look at taxes. It's a punishment of sorts.
Well,
If I wanted to put an addition on my house, improve upon my situation, uh, I have to pay more in taxes in order to be able to have that. It gets maddening. It gets you to the point. It's like you don't actually want, because then the real question comes down to, well, what are my taxes paying for in the first place? And now we get into this whole other issue of how tax dollars are used and the waste.
Yeah, I'm going to take a philosophical, historic sidebar here and talk about the 16th Amendment that was passed in 1913. We were talking about this before the show. That created the IRS. So I think all of a sudden, the mindset of people in government was, how can we survive? How can we provide services with the limited resources that we have? So we're only going to focus on the basics, the requirements that our constitutions, mandate. Once the IRS came into being, money was no object anymore. So the mindset, I think, of government changed. And gee, if I have a good idea, paying for it is not a problem because we can always get more money. We can always tax more. And I think that spread down to states and municipalities. And so now it's, gee, how else can we get money? Because we have lots of good ideas. And so I went online, and there's there's one organization, balancepolitics.org, lists 100 different ways you're being taxed. And it comes from, dog licensing fees and park fees and parking fees and all this stuff.
You're literally taxed 24/7.
Right. So it changed my mindset of, what do I pay in taxes? Well, I pay, this much in state tax and this much in federal taxes. But then I'm looking around, I'm saying my house itself, my property, everything in the house has a tax price tag on it now. there's hidden taxes, there's sales taxes, there's tax on the electricity that I use.
I was just
There's
going to
tax on
mention
the gas I
utilities.
used.
Yep.
And so it was hard to get an estimate of how much taxes do Americans really pay, because
Sure.
it's so it's so hard to track everything down, and there's wide gamut of income levels, but the best estimates are basically about 30% of what you earn goes to taxes.
I would argue it's higher than that.
I think it's higher than that too, but let's just say conservatively. That means you're working from January to sometime in the middle of April for government.
Yep.
That's crazy. Even God only asked for 10%.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe he knew what he was talking about.
I mean, I'm finding out that in Florida it's like HOA, another fee towards your house. Then we talked about the CDD, another fee that they roll into your property taxes, so it's hidden there and they charge you. Taxes were, I think, the drug the government just created and lived off of, so that they could just do whatever they wanted to endear themselves to certain organizations, to certain parties, and businesses, so they made money. I mean, Doge never lied. That whole thing didn't lie. They never said they lied. They just kept arguing that he wasn't elected. They never lied. So all of this money that and we take in more money as a country every single year in taxes. It grows and grows. But yet, where does it go? You have the Pentagon claiming they lost like billions of dollars every year. Can't account for it. How do you not account for billions of dollars? And then it's just like, oh, okay, well, we just didn't, no punishment, no audit, nothing. It's like standard operating procedures in government, to just misplace our taxes, or we're the only country in the world that we work hard to go to other countries. No other country sends their tax dollars to the United States. Period.
Yeah. I mean, the other side of this coin is, property taxes is the big one. But if we want to do something more fair, we eliminate property taxes. How much money will government need to survive? So I think if we were to get a sales tax to cover all that expense, that would be almost prohibitive, nearly prohibitive, because our governments are so bloated. So I think we have to reduce the waste in government first, and then we can go to some kind of, it would have to be I would think a sales tax of some type.
I think for most of our listeners there, like the easiest way to kind of absorb some of what we're saying is that how the government needs to work a little bit more, or rather a lot more, like a household, right? And if you're only bringing in X amount of dollars, you can only spend X amount of dollars. And if you find yourself getting into debt, every credit consultant would tell you the first thing you do is reduce expenses. And that's absolutely what government needs to do at every level. Is, if you think about like what are the absolute essential services, not essential programs, but essential services. And really it gets down to, I'd have to say, police, fire, waste, refuse,
DPW,
DPW type stuff.
That's it.
And you made it a point to mention how schools are, in most municipalities, 70 to 80% of the town budget goes to the school department. That's a massive expense.
Yeah. And the town I lived in Seekonk, it's over 70% goes to schools.
Yeah.
And schools they're not growing because people aren't having the 3 and 4 children families anymore. They're having one child.
Yeah.
Population in schools are going down, and yet the budgets are skyrocketing. And the other issue is, I was a teacher one time, Dave, so this is no slight on the bride there. But I got to tell you, in the experience I've seen down here in Florida, the public school system here is horrible. But I go over and I worked in a charter school, phenomenal education, fantastic atmosphere. Kids are well behaved, they're learning. But you know, you go to the public schools and it's like, oh my God, it's a mess. But didn't somebody, was it on one of our programs, didn't somebody mention that there's a state that once you do not have children anymore in school systems?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did. You did.
Yeah, I brought that up last week, actually.
right.
So my father lives in South Carolina. My father and stepmother, they live in a community called Longs, and it's just outside of Myrtle Beach, probably 15 minutes or so. And they do not pay taxes to support the school district because of their age, because of and I can't remember if it's, because they're, getting Social Security. So basically they have a way of determining you're of an age where you do not have children going to school.
Now,
unless you are adopted.
Is that statewide or just that county?
I believe it's the county.
Okay.
But I also believe that it's something that's replicated in most of the counties.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I know of a couple of cities and towns up in Massachusetts, because when I was working on the town charter up there, I had to communicate with that. They actually take the tax bill that goes out to the populace there in the town and they break it up. This is the part of your taxes that goes to school. Mm-hmm. And yep. This is the part that goes to everything else. And when people see that in comparison, like you said, that's a 70, 30, 60 or 65, whatever, they say, wow. And I don't even have any kids in the schools anymore,
But even for people that don't have kids, if things come up, no one wants to present themselves as somebody who's against the kids. Nobody wants to come out and say, I don't want a fancy high school. I don't want a middle school, because our kids are worth it, right? So that's what's always used. And
it is. And they embarrass people. They embarrass them.
Yes. Yeah. It's a guilt thing. Yes.
I've seen that at town meetings. Oh yeah.
And then you got to say too, like when you're looking at the schools, and I think we have a similar issue here where, I know of a guy I was in the military with. His wife taught at one of the charter schools, and they just got, like, I don't want to say no funding, but the level of funding that they got was barely enough to pay like the heating bill for the building. It was not that environment that you just described. So I think some states do better with the charter school issue. One of the other things I wanted to bring up too, in actually, so Rhode Island just passed a $14.8 or $14.6 billion budget for the year. And so one of the things, not with this year in particular, but something that had come up previously is, I want to say it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 60% of the state budget, at least at the time, had to do with paying pensions for all the different state employees over decades and decades and decades. State police, Department of Corrections, Department of Transportation, Department of Health, all the different state departments. And there was a point in the not too distant past where the state of Rhode Island is the single largest employer in the state of Rhode Island.
True.
because of all the different services that they provide. And so one of the, as you look, I mentioned the glide path, like how did we get ourselves out of this situation? But one of the things to acknowledge in all this is you've got decades and decades of state employees who qualified under contract, so now it's a legal issue. Okay. Basics of contract law. They agreed to work under certain conditions in exchange for a certain type of pay and benefits and X, Y, Z. So now we have those pension liabilities for thousands and thousands and thousands of former state employees who are in the latter years of their life. My mother being one of them. She was a correctional officer. I was mentioning before we started the show, she got into that career field somewhat late, as compared to most. She did, 20 years and a month, basically just enough to be able to qualify for retirement. And and it's not like it was a great pension. It was one of the worst pensions in the entire state system, right? 40%, like the norm is usually 50% at 20 years, 40% at 20 years. And so either way, she basically took the money and ran.
Yeah.
But now as you're trying to resolve this problem, you say to yourself, okay, well, how? It's really something that needs a lot of study. But how do you still make good on those contractual obligations?
Yeah, that's certainly a big problem. But wrapping this up, we only barely scratched the surface of this topic.
Indeed.
But I think everyone has a sense that Americans are paying an awful lot of their income to governments, state, local, federal. And how can we fight that? There's not going to be much you can do, to fight government reducing taxation. You have to reduce the size of government, right? You have to turn off the free money spigot that started in the 16th Amendment. You got to turn off. You got to turn it off and tell the government, no, it's not unlimited funds. We're not an unlimited resource out here trying to live our lives. And I'm thinking the only way to do that is to have an amendment that fixes it. But the only way that amendment is going to happen is through some kind of convention of states, an Article 5 convention of states. So your 15-minute Patriot task for this week is to research what group do you want to support that will limit the funds going to government. There's conventionofstates.com. There's FFSF. That's another good organization. But get involved, get informed, and let's make this happen. If you have any other ideas of how we can reduce our tax burden, I'd love to hear it. And you can reach us at 15minutepatriot@gmail.com. That's 15patriot. 15minute patriot spelled out at gmail.com. Looking forward to your comments. Anything else, gents?
Nope.
Okay.
End taxation.
Yes.
Without representation, like CDD. All right. Take care.